The cover of this pocket-sized volume features a swirl of orange, yellow, and green. The title, A Brief Look at Infra-Materialism, is set in an authoritative yet approachable serif font. What an interesting color palette. It's vibrant, yet somehow leaves you ever so slightly nauseated. No. These are terrible colors. They're like apricots. On the inside jacket flap, you find a brief summary. What is infra-materialism? A highly theoretical branch of Masovian communism? A collection of mystical ramblings by a discredited revolutionary? Or possibly both? This brief look, TM, introduces readers to one of this century's most fascinating and misunderstood theories in a concise, jargon-free manner. You turn to the table of contents. The guide itself is divided into several sections with seemingly esoteric titles like Effects of Plasm on Root Vegetables and Mental Projection and Transference. There's also a brief introduction about the life of Ignis Nielsen. Known to his numerous admirers as the evangelist of the revolution, and to his even more numerous enemies as the apocalyptic Shrike, Ignis Nielsen remains one of the most controversial and fascinating figures to emerge in the years of the anti-centennial revolution, second only to Karamazov himself. During his unparalleled life, he helped guide a revolution in one country and found a new state in another. Along the way, he committed some of the most notorious war crimes in an era famed for its atrocities. He is your brother, a fellow doom prophet, and yet his most fascinating contribution to history may be the most overlooked. His theory of ideological plasm, from which his followers and successors developed the school of communism known as Infra-Materialism. If you're like most people, you probably believe that your thoughts reside in your brain, right? That's not right at all. Thoughts don't exist in the brain. They float through the air. Your brain is but a fish swimming through them. This sounds more like a question for a psychiatrist. See also a brief look at psychiatry. But let's stick with Ignis Nielsen a moment. As Mazov's devoted comrade and leading theoretician, Nielsen was responsible for developing much of the intellectual foundation of communism. But his interests and speculations were famously wide-ranging. During his final years in exile, he produced, among other things, an early guide to home brewing, instructions for raising revolutionary children, plans for a universal pictographic language, and a detailed materialist critique of Dolores Day's chess strategy. A true man of ideas, equal to any of the great DeLorean polymaths. But one subject he returned to time and time again was the fundamental relationship between thoughts and matter. We may yet discover, he wrote in his notebooks, that under certain exceptional circumstances, the proletariat's embrace of historical materialism may be so fervent that their beliefs take form in the world of matter as a kind of revolutionary plasm. Certainly, in essence, Nielsen is arguing that thoughts don't just reside inside the brain, they radiate outward from it. According to this idea, the brain is an ideological transponder, constantly emitting waves of highly politicized energy, which Nielsen called plasm. Stay with us a moment longer. What's more, Nielsen speculated that this plasm, when it becomes powerful enough, might begin to influence the material reality surrounding it. Hence the name, Infra-Materialism. Unfortunately, Nielsen passed away before he was able to develop these initial ideas into a full-fledged theory. That work was left to subsequent generations of communist theorists. Building on Nielsen's basic insight, these theorists reached a startling conclusion that a sufficiently revolutionary state might begin to exhibit certain extra-physical effects based on the amount of plasm generated by its citizens. The actual theory is highly technical, but for the purposes of this brief look, TM, that's a fine working definition of the concept. That's because this is absolute idiocy, not even worth engaging with. No, no, no. There's something here. You can feel it. Infra-materialists divide the extra-physical effects of the revolutionary state by the level of plasm required to achieve them. At the lowest, or first level, revolutionary plasm is believed to stimulate or invigorate matter without altering its essential properties. To take one example, during the revolutionary period, many communard farmers in Grad reported extraordinary yields of certain root vegetables, most notably turnips. The difference in these yields was simply too great to be accounted for by mere climate or soil conditions. The only reasonable explanation, infra-materialists argue, is the high level of revolutionary plasm emanating from the commune itself. Even today, in parts of the SRV, there are collective farms whose root vegetable yields exceed those thought possible by capitalist agronomists. Who's to say the farmers aren't just cooking the books? Sounds like obvious SRV propaganda. It's also been postulated that plasm may account for the remarkably full and manly facial hair observed on some communist males. Your Your hand feels clammy against your bare chin. You wipe it along the back of the book and keep reading. Of course, infra-materialists argue that revolutionary plasm may stimulate human physiology in other ways as well. In fact, reports from the revolutionary period claim that the most radically devoted communards were able to engage in vigorous intercourse for up to 8 hours at a time. "8 hours? There's no way. Your equipment would be mashed to jelly." No wonder the communards couldn't shoot straight. They were too shagged out. Hyperproductive vegetables and ultra-horny communards are fine, but this theory hasn't quite gotten strange enough for you. And on that note, you feel like you've gotten the general idea of infra-materialism, enough to carry on a basic conversation at least. But if you'd like to go even deeper into some of the more speculative aspects of the theory, you could always read further. Of course you want to go deeper. What else are you here for? The book fits quite snugly into your palm. You flip forward a few pages until you come upon a chapter titled Mental Projection and Transference. When a community has achieved a sufficiently high degree of revolutionary fervor, infra-materialists believe that second-level effects may be observed. At this second level, certain hyper-revolutionary individuals may even develop the ability to extend their thoughts into material space and vice versa. According to infra-materialist theory, yes. Under suitably revolutionary conditions, that is. Of course, one doesn't need to be a communist to be attuned to the thoughts of your brothers and sisters. It's become something of a folk legend that during their final meeting, Nielsen and Mazov didn't speak a single word, preferring to sit in silence with their chamomile tea, reading one another's thoughts. One of the minor tragedies of the late revolutionary period is that few reliable accounts survive. Much of what we know of the communards' activities during this period come from memoirs and second-hand accounts, some only written down decades after the fact, and of dubious authenticity.
I suppose we do work quite well together.
Your words hang in the air as the lieutenant scribbles something in his notebook. At some point, he realizes you're waiting for him and looks up with a tightly knit brow.
We have never shared a sandwich, Detective. Despite your heroic efforts, I might add.
As we were saying, it's generally believed that these effects are only exhibited by certain hyper-revolutionary individuals, generally less than 0.01% of the revolutionary population. Because plasm has never been directly observed, the exact mechanism behind these effects remains entirely speculative. In other words, there's no evidence that any of this mind-reading stuff is real. Why are you getting hung up on mechanisms Open your mind's aperture just a little wider. You're so close to true understanding. Most infra-materialists would argue that the inability of skeptics to detect plasm is simply evidence of their own insufficient revolutionary enthusiasm. There you have it, a perfectly unfalsifiable loop. The theory is impossible to disprove on its own grounds. Meaning, it's hardly a theory at all. This should be more than enough for a stimulating discussion. That said, if you're still yearning for more, you must. Everyone knows books save their best parts for the end. You breeze through the next several sections until you arrive at the final chapter, titled A Communism Above Reality. When a society's revolutionary fervor reaches the third and highest level, infra-materialist theoreticians have postulated that the laws of physics cease to be laws. More like suggestions, according to some of the SRV's leading infra-materialists. Of course, it's impossible to say what exactly happens under these conditions. No known society has ever achieved the levels of revolutionary enthusiasm the theory seems to require. Some infra-materialists have even argued that it might require more plasm than humanity alone may be capable of producing. In the SRV, there have been attempts to organize certain species of aquatic mammals, as well as a few of the higher corvids. But as of this writing, only human beings have demonstrated the intellectual capacity for revolutionary communism. There are numerous stories from Samara involving bandits or fascist mercenaries being levitated by farmers from the most ideologically advanced communes. Of course, few of these incidents have ever been rigorously investigated or substantiated. The form of these stories also recalls several well-known Samoan folk tales, in particular the one commonly known as Clever Oleg and the Flying Magistrate. Among known attempts to channel third-level capabilities, the most well-documented is the curious case of Coalition warship Debutante. It concerns an interesting series of events that took place during the invasion of Revachol. As coalition forces made landfall, a cadre of Nielsen's most fervent acolytes attempted to compress a coalition-era static with their collective will. According to communard law, these acolytes positioned themselves at the top of a redoubt just over the bay of Revachol. From that vantage, they proceeded to visualize pinching Coalition warship Debutante between their fingers, a gesture believed to assist in the extra-physical materialization of their thoughts. The acolytes, along with the redoubt, were vaporized in an artillery strike before the process could be completed. Picture the lot of them, all standing with their fingers in the air 1 minute, the next reduced to a bloody mist. It's been said, though, that in the weeks following the battle, the captain of the debutante noted an increase in incidents of crewmen striking their heads on unexpectedly low bulkheads. Of course, colorful anecdotes only scratch the surface of what infra-materialists believe may be possible in a truly third-level society. Some have theorized that such a society would be fundamentally unrecognizable, lacking many of the institutions we typically take for granted in advanced societies, including organized governments, financial institutions, and law enforcement. Others have argued that people living under third-level conditions will be immune to such infirmities as hunger, disease, and mental illness. In some of his later writings, Nielsen himself speculated about the potential for an extra-physical architecture that disregards the laws of bourgeois physics and instead relies on the revolutionary faith of the people for structural integrity. Precisely. Nielsen observed that the financial system operates on the same principle of faith. So why not an architectural system? On the following page, you come across a few black and white reproductions from Nielsen's own notebooks. One sketch depicts a government ministry shaped like a great inverted pyramid, a hectare in width at the top, balanced atop foundations the size of common apartments. Another depicts a leaning tower wrapped in a dramatic helix. The caption beneath it reads, "The Tower of History." In the corner of one of the reproduced notebook pages, you can make out the following words, written in Nielsen's distinctive slashing script. "A state that has lost the faith of its people has forfeited the right to exist." There is no more. You've reached the outer theoretical limits of communism, and in less than 200 pages. If you'd like to read further, may we recommend a brief look at Occidental architecture